2-week, 4-week, 6-week auction campaigns. What is the best? Stay tuned. Welcome to Morning with myself, Michael Bergio, Mark Novak, and special guest, the boss, Lisa Novak.
You're a brat, Berge.
How are we all this morning? Feeling fresh?
Looks like a Bergio sandwich.
Yeah. Hello, guys. Hi.
Guys, I'm keeping my glasses on. I may or may not have had a very, very entertaining night.
That's all right. That's all right.
Thank you to Hugo's at Manly.
Thank you to Hugo's at Manly, absolutely. It's coming up to the birthday weekend, so celebrations all around.
It's Lisa's birthday.
Not today.
22nd.
Mark makes it the birthday.
It's on Friday.
Right, beautiful.
What?
But basically coming into Chrissy, everything's going to be, it's this sort of next month will just be a hangover. Christmas parties, Christmas. So I think just get used to it. Bring it on. But
we're all entitled to it. You know that? We're all completely entitled to it.
It's been a tough year.
It has.
It's been a tough year.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into it. Let's talk about auctions. Auctions. There's many different auctions. A lot of people do sort of a 4-week campaign, sometimes a little longer, sometimes a little shorter. What do you guys? Hey, Christy. G'day, Luke. What do you guys reckon about auctions with the timing? When you do one, do you like doing a 4-week campaign, 2 or 6?
Okay, so look, I personally as an agent don't do a huge amount of auctions. As many people know, I do a lot of pre-market sales, which incidentally is quite similar to what the industry's been doing for many years, pre-auction selling, right? But auction has always been given industry-wide. I think the stock standard time frame for auction is 4 weeks. You know, we start the campaign and then we generally do on the 4th week of the campaign, we generally set the auction. So, and it's always been interesting to me, Birch, coming to sales again, you know, just over 2.5 years ago, I was like, wow, that seems like quite a long time. But I guess that's the industry called that the 4-week test of the market, I suppose, right? But
don't forget that what auctions were modelled off and the type of marketing that auctions were modelled off. Auctions for property have been around like hardcore for probably about 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And the actual technology has changed rapidly in that 30 years. So before, when we were auctioning properties, we were relying on print, on newspapers, on deliveries into letterboxes, and technology has changed, but the duration of an auction has not.
Oh my God, that is such a relevant point.
That's a good point there. And
I love that. And so, Bird, you know what my favourite saying is, don't you? When the rate of change on the outside of your industry is exceeding the rate of change on the inside of your industry, you're in trouble. And so, you know, you've got to ask, is this a question around that? Because is the 4-week auction campaign now too long? And then what happens when you're in a red hot market like many of us are now, and you've got buyers galore and not a huge amount of listings? You can't expect hot buyers to hold on for 4 weeks because you're doing an auction.
Yeah, and I think a good point, which goes into what you both just said, getting the property on the market was so much longer and you didn't have as much exposure. Like, look at our pre-market now is almost busier than being on the market through database, social media, and look at the quality and the speed of getting it up and running. So I think back in your day, Mark, when you started, basically your 4-week auction, there would have been very minimal exposure prior to that start date going live on the in the paper, live online, maybe a couple hot buys here or there that you bring through, you would have brought through. But now when you look at, if we book a 4-week auction, that 1 or 2 weeks lead time for everything we've already probably had 10,000 views on Facebook. We've already had people coming through and a lot of offers. So
Had offers, correct. Yeah.
So
I would suggest that overexposure is as dangerous as underexposure. And what I mean by that is a 4-week. If you're over marketing a property and it's just like still not sold, that's just as dangerous with price, with getting, what I mean? Like you got to watch. So, I think, guys, we've got to be really careful about these 4-week auctions now. And ahead of the curve, I reckon we're not going to be doing them any longer.
Oh, that's a massive call. Well, but can I ask this, Burge? What happens then in the lead up to things like Christmas, where as an industry we start talking dates instead of days or months? We start actually talking dates. So there's no point doing a 4-week auction campaign, which is going to push right up against.
Oh, hang on, Lisa. Let me unmute you. Lisa, you've muted yourself. Hang on, guys. Where'd Marco?
Just give us a sec. Sorry, guys. Technical hitch.
Yeah, all
but
good.
That's always quite interesting. Now, I know for a fact that someone like Josh Tesselin, who started to do quite a few auctions of late, and I don't know if that's because he joined the Ray White group and that's the way those guys do things, but I know for a fact that he's doing short, sharp auctions, right? So he'll bring on a listing and then he'll call the auction in 10 days' time. And I think that's great. We do a lot of those, right? We do these snap auctions.
Yes,
What we call a snap auction.
And this is where you can do a short auction when you've done a great pre-market campaign with lots of offers, and the owner wants to go to on the market just to make sure they've ticked that box so they can look back and say, yep, I know I've done everything. Like even if it's a very successful pre-market, I think what we're going to do more and more, and which we have done, are the snap auctions. So you do a week or two pre-market, busy, and then you come on to realestate.com for basically 2 weeks and you let it rip, because there is always that fear because put it this way, if you show let's say you've got the hot buyer which saw it in pre-market, then there were 2 weeks pre-market, and then you go to realestate.com 4 weeks. It's very hard to keep a buyer around for 6 weeks. They're just going to look elsewhere, and you may lose that buyer.
But don't forget,
and
for anyone who's a bit foreign to real estate, we're talking about auctions. The general said thing to do is by the time you have your first open house to by the time you sell the property, it's normally a 4-week or 4.5-week duration. And we're talking about that process, shortening that process. Guys, you've got to look at the fundamentals of this. The sales process of selling anything in the world has become shortened. The sales process of selling anything in the world has become shortened. eBay has helped us with that. eBay is an example of that. Amazon is an example of that. Carsales.com is an example of that. Pexa with lawyers getting it done over electronically is an example of that. Every process has been shortened to get shit done, except for the bloody 4-week auction campaign process. That's still sitting at, with all the technology, it's still sitting at 4 weeks.
Why are agents still doing the 4 weeks? And who actually called it in the industry and said, that is the test of the market, that's where we draw the finish line at the 4-week mark? So, and I agree. I just think 4 weeks is way too long these days.
It's great exposure for the real estate agent.
I reckon that was a big component of it.
Is that what it is?
It would have been 4 weeks in the paper. I reckon definitely would have been one of the reasons.
I agree. It used to be 4 weeks in the paper. It used to be 4 weeks in the paper. And Mark, you're so right about what you said earlier on in the show. For those of you guys that missed that, I'm just going to put my sunnies back on. For those of you guys that missed that, it is so true, because, when we used to place ads in the newspapers or have to get DL cards made up to drop in letterboxes, that process was timely. It was so timely. There was generally, we had to book Manly Daily a week ahead of time, if you guys remember. And so everything was pushed out and everything was made longer. These days, it doesn't need to be that way. If you've got, I did do an auction. I don't do many of them, but I did do an auction about a month ago, and we had a number of offers come in, and I said, guys, let's just hold the auction next week. We've got 9 buyers here. Let's just hold the auction next
Snap
week.
auction.
We can't possibly expect these people to wait on.
And that's
I just think that's craziness. And is it more about the agent than it is about the actual vendor's interest and property itself? That's the question you've got to ask.
That's a good segue into my point for this is I don't mind the 4-week auction campaign, but I think agents are being lazy and not adapting. So it's almost like a default setting. They're not each campaign is case by case. So if you've done a monster 2-week pre-market campaign, you shouldn't be doing a 4-week auction campaign, in my opinion, if you've got buyers. If you're coming onto the market with no pre-market, then I don't mind a 4-week campaign. Also, what I don't mind doing, which is a good tip as well, when you're in between, you set the auction, but you don't set the date. So you can gives yourself flexibility, because when you get one of those properties come to market and you're like, I'm pretty sure this will be a unicorn property that will get a lot of buzz, but the market's a little bit iffy. So let's market as an auction. Let's see what the activity is like within the first 2 weeks, and we may do it the following week, or we may drag it out longer. It's about agents being adaptable, reading the play campaign to campaign. I see too many agents where they put
oh my God, Burge, you just nailed it.
Yeah.
No, you just nailed it right there. Because as an industry, we've got to make sure that we're adapting and giving the right medicine to our vendors that's required to get the successful campaign done. Whatever that might be. If it's a pre-market offer and it's going to knock their socks off, good and well, advise them, right? Cook Street, Forestville, there's a prime example. I had offers come in pre-market. They were good. I didn't think they were amazing. I felt there was going to be more out there for the vendor. I advised them, let's get onto the portals. I reckon we're going to get even more interest. That's exactly what we did, and we did.
And you got to remember, guys, it's if you have the hottest buyer in the marketplace that's going to pay the absolute maximum for the property, they're not going to see it in week 3 or 2 or week 4. They're going to see it bang, first hour, bang, as soon as it comes on. Why? Because they're so freaking hot. They've registered on the on every agent's database. They're so hot. They've registered on realestate.com, for example. They've registered themselves. They're looking everywhere, every day, all the time. They are keen.
Exactly.
So that 10-year. My question is the newfound ways to sell properties in the last 10 years with technology. How have they changed the 30-year-old auction process? They haven't.
I agree. And it always intrigues me, like, why?
Pre-market.
But guys, we all know as agents, all right, if we're going to do the stock standard marketing campaign that the whole industry's doing, let's look at that for a sec. We got vendor paid advertising, and we put the property onto realestate.com and domain, okay? We know in week 1 there's going to be we would hope there's going to be a huge level of activity. Inquiries, we're going to see really decent buyer numbers coming through open homes. Week 2 is still good, but it's starting to taper. I can assure you by week 4, you're lucky to have anyone coming to your open homes, let alone getting them to hold on tight for an auction campaign.
Real buyers.
It's barbaric to me. It's barbaric. The industry needs to wake up.
Waste of time, waste of money.
And we've got to ask ourselves, is that for the betterment of the agent or for the betterment of the client?
Week 4 is a waste of time and a waste of money.
You're onto something there as well, because we know if the property's on the market after 4 weeks, there's sort of something wrong. Like there's something wrong. Promotion, price, or the property. So why, if you do that sort of auction campaign within sort of end of week 2, week 3, let's say if it doesn't sell for whatever reason, then it's still pretty fresh. But when you drag it on for 4 weeks, it doesn't sell. When you're 6 weeks on the market, especially in our area, that's like, I'm not even going to bother looking at it. But another thing that really sort of pees me off with not agents reading the play with the length of the auction, but also auctioning properties that should not be auctioned. Like, we've gone through this in the show before. You've got your A, B, C, and I find a lot of agents do it to hide away from their lack of negotiation skills and lack of hunger as well. It's almost like set and forget, rock up on the day, and hopefully it buys it. And a lot of agents get away with it because we live.
Yeah, but you know why the industry. Yeah, but you know what, Burge? You know why the industry does that? Because it always baffled me as well. I was always like, what do you mean you've got an auction and then you haven't set a date? They need to give it some finality. They need to create that urgency. You know, oh, well, we're going to take the property to auction. They need to create the urgency, right? So that's why the industry does this. We're going to be taking the property to auction. You know, and I've always said coming into the industry, and I know I disrupted quite a lot of things, but you know, there were many things that I saw with a fresh set of eyes coming into the industry, having already been, you know, in the back seat for a long time.
Long time.
A long time. And that was, you know, if the industry truly believes that the auction, the 4-week final, you know, the 4-week finish line is at 4 weeks, then why are agents selling before the auction?
Yeah, and I think it's key to always leave it open.
You know, because I've not so much now, but, you know, certainly up until about a year ago, I copped a lot of flack for a lot of the pre-market sales that I was doing. You know, the industry said, oh, well, you haven't tested the market. Tested the market? Excuse me, real estate people, why are you selling properties then pre-auction if the auction's the finish line? You know? Yeah. But anyway, look, it's interesting. We have certainly been stuck in a time warp. I think, you know, most of the people in the world now know that, you know, Novak have disrupted many things in the real estate industry, but it's just stuff that we saw ourselves. We love service.
The oracles.
But
the Matrix.
The Matrix. I love that. But, you know, we love service, right? And Birch, you would agree. You know, you go online these days and when you want to order your food, you're ordering based on what's going to be at your door fastest, or the Uber that will be at your car at your front door the fastest.
He was looking at food, rather than looking at the actual type of food, he was looking at who would deliver fastest. And I think that's been a big shift for a lot of people in everything you do.
And I was looking at lighting last night. Sorry, Mark. I was looking at lighting last night for our home, and there were some great, gorgeous things that I saw, but none of them were actually in stock. They're on consignment, and they're bringing them in from overseas.
Yeah,
and I actually
go to Bunnings.
What I typed into my search engine, not that kind of lighting. What I typed into my search engine was delivery within 3 days, lighting Australia. Because that's what we want.
Exactly.
That's what we want.
Alrighty. That's a wrap.
Definitely not cheapest.
That's a wrap for this morning.
I want to keep talking. I missed the McDonald's drive-through. I was hoping to go through the McDonald's drive-through and I missed it. I was talking too much.
You should come on the show more often, Lisa.
You were very excited this morning, Burge, when you heard I was coming on.
Yeah, just whoo. It's good. I just got to work a little bit in there with the conversation, though. You just got so much goodness to say.
I can't stop to it. That's it. I'll never be remembered for being quiet.
So for anyone who doesn't know, the average. The average female has a word count daily of about 4,500, and in fact, an average male has a word count of about 1,500. So that's why Lisa's been talking so much.
I think I got all my words out this morning before 8.
Like, I was so happy when you said that's a great point, but when you sort of interrupted in the middle of my second part of my point and just continued, I was like, well, the next point would have been fucking better.
Well, do you want to get it out now? I'll be quiet.
No, it's okay. It's good. I appreciate it.
You're over it now.
I'm over it now. I just found it funny. All righty. It was great. We'll have you back on maybe next week sometime.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Mark,
have a good one.
You? Oh, Mark's here.
No, I think Lisa said everything I want to say.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So then, you know what? I'm never coming on this show ever again.
Don't worry, Mark. You've got your breakfast at Novak. You can get a few words in then.
Thank God.
I might host that today, actually.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh.
All right, give me that mic.
Give it.
All right, guys, have a good one.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
See you
See
later.
ya.
Bye.
Bye.